What's the latest? Do you expect the Leafs to make a move here?
I do. Look, they're in a spot that you take a look at their top 6 defensemen at this point in this exact moment in time. I thought when Jake Muzzin went down, it necessitated a move. And now with Morgan Riley out for the next while, that I think there's certainly it's only heightened that need. Look, Mac Hollowell doesn't even have a graphic on Daily Faceoff. I mean, come on,
That's what I noticed.
That's telling in and of itself. We've got graphics for everyone. So for me, I look at this group and look, as much as Mark Giordano is excited to play more minutes, and you're going to get to see more from Rasmus Sandin and Timmy Liljegren. I think they're in a spot where the only question is when and how big of a swing do they take. It's not if.
So what are you hearing in terms of names on that front? And I know, it's a great point, right? Because they have to sort of protect the Riley cap hit and all of that for when he comes back. And there's other things, including the contract situation with 50 in and 50 out, certainly. But what kind of names are you hearing? Like, is it going to be the rental market? Or are they pretty much interested in anything right now?
I think they have to be open to anything. And I think a really good starting point is the list that I put out last week, 6 potential fits to replace Jake Muzzin, because a lot of that list, in fact, all of it still applies today with Riley being out. So you have to account, of course, for the fact, as you mentioned, that they're expecting Riley back sometime in 2023. You have to account for the idea that, maybe there's the contract issue. Although I don't ever see that as big of a hurdle. You can always dump someone somewhere for future considerations to a team who's willing to do you a favor, just to will out of that issue if it really push comes to shove. But the thing for me is it a temporary stopgap solution, a warm body that you can put in your lineup now for the next number of weeks? That's nice playoff insurance. Or is it more than that? Is it a big swing, someone like a John Klingberg on the rental market, or someone with term like a Matt Roy in Los Angeles? So there's a number of different options, but I think reading the market, Nick, to me, one of the biggest things that I've learned is there's so few guys that are out there that have term that teams are willing to move on from. It's a really scarce list. And as much as the Leafs would probably prefer to have a non-rental, have a player with term, that they may have to adjust their thinking process here and move forward in a different direction.
Rosie, this is your
what
time
else,
to
Frank?
shine.
Frank, what do you see as say they don't get that rental guy and they get a guy with term who's got the potential to actually make a difference in this Leafs lineup going forward, and like kind of like a permanent stay, like what the fans are saying, we need this guy. What do you see as them giving up to get that if it becomes available?
It depends on who it is, right? Like, so you see Matt Roy, that's he's the only guy on this list that actually has term. I know it says here that he's a pending UFA. He's not. But it depends on which way you want to go. And so I did Toronto radio yesterday, Fan 590, and Ben Ennis was the host, and he asked me, what do you think about the idea of the Leafs going after Erik Karlsson? And I immediately dismissed it out of hand, but it's actually going to be a talking point on Daily Faceoff Live today, because I think you actually have to take a step back and consider all of the different options that might be on the table. At first glance, I was like, this is a really complicated transaction. There's so many moving parts to this. He has an $11.5 million cap hit, and for a team that already has 3 8-figure cap hits, that's almost exactly the last thing that the Toronto Maple Leafs need. But I think you could actually make an interesting argument now that I've taken a step back and internalized the question a bit, and say that it makes more sense for Toronto Maple Leafs and their future to go after a player like that at full cap hit and not have to give any of your future up, meaning the assets that you might trade to get one of these rental players, to get a John Klingberg, or to get someone else, and keep those players, whether it's the first round pick and Matthew Nyes or Nick Robertson, whoever it might be, so that you have players that are contributing to your team in the future on entry-level contracts. If you're going to be taking on a burden like that in Erik Karlsson, who is so elite, who has the connection in their front office with Jason Spezza, it sounds utterly outrageous and outlandish until you take a step back to really kind of consider the big picture. I think it's very unlikely still, but I think if the Leafs, you got to put every single option on the table and at least work your way through it.